where strategy gaming meets good vibes. No stress, just critical moves. Welcome back to Critical Moves. Today we're going to be talking about the golden age of RTS gaming, a subject which is very close to my heart. I'm joined by Jack.
Hello, everybody.
And by my best pal in the world, Timothy.
Aw, thank you. Hey, everyone.
That just means I've got no friends, man. You know. Before we begin, I want to take something up with the pair of you, and it's maybe why we can't actually be real friends. And this is your collective hatred of Star Wars. I listened to episode 29. Where are you getting that from?
Hate is a big word. It's just personally, I think Star Wars. It's too morally black and white, I guess.
Sacrilege.
Also, it's very fantasy. It's very fantasy, not very sci-fi.
Yeah, it's science fantasy, but it's epic. It's the best thing in the world.
I mean, best thing in the world, I guess not, and that's where we differ. I mean, it can be nice. There's some nice things about it. It's not the best thing in the world.
Okay. And you, Jack, I don't like Star Wars. I'm fairly certain that's a direct quote.
Yeah, I'm really happy that you brought up episode 29 because it was such a good episode, so everybody should go watch it for my opinions. I think I did say there that one of my fears with Star Wars, after this major unnamed corporation took it over, was just like them diluting the franchise, right? I think, just like Tim, I don't have an issue with Star Wars necessarily. I don't hate it. I just, I want more from that franchise.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I mean, you can name Disney. It's fine. It's it's okay.
Yeah, the House of the Mouse took it over, and you know, we lost out on so many good stories. I know they try to decanonize Legends. I didn't read any of those books, but I'm sure that made people mad.
What bothered me the most was decanonizing Knights of the Old Republic. Such a good story too. Okay,
we'll save the Star Wars debate for another time, because the reason why we're here is to talk about what we think would be the golden age of RTS. Well, I know what the golden age of RTS games are, and I'm coming to this as the old man of the podcast. I was born, ironically, the same year that Star Wars released, 1977. So me and Star Wars go hand in hand, baby. The golden age of RTS, I'm going to just jump in and say 1995 until 2007. Now, do you guys remember playing games during that time?
Oh, yeah, my goodness, yes, I do.
Jack, youngster?
This is a trick question. No, I do not remember playing games before they had color monitors.
That's just mean.
Oh,
that's a shot across the bows. That is. We've talked about RTS games a lot on this podcast, and Tim and I are both huge RTS fans, and that's maybe the reason why. But for me, the golden age started right back in 1995 when Command & Conquer was released.
And Warcraft 2, Tides of Darkness.
Yep, and it just seemed to be a time, maybe less golden age and maybe gold rush. It seemed like everybody wanted a slice of the action.
There's a lot of those that came out in the late 90s. And if you look at like Game Awards and so on, a lot of the Game of the Year awards were also RTS games.
Well, it was a time when RTS games dominated PCs. It was before the move to MOBA. It was before you had serious console gaming. PC gaming was RTS gaming back then. I remember it well. Those are my formative years. I remember playing Command & Conquer in 1995. I remember playing, I loved Red Alert. I remember playing that in 1996. And then it just went on from there. But if you think back or look back at that time, because Jack can't think back that far, what's the one title, Tim, that jumps out at you from the mid to late 90s?
Yeah, Age of Empires 2, probably. But I mean, there's just so many. That's the big thing that hits me, is that there's so many big classics from that time that are still held up as like very influential RTS games, and they're all special to me. I mean, Age of Empires, Age of Empires 2, StarCraft, Warcraft, Red Alert. I think those are all very big games that influenced me at the time, and it's hard to put them apart in a way.
Yeah, I think that this was the period of time that made Blizzard into the name that it was.
Yeah.
With Warcraft and with StarCraft. I mean, StarCraft is considered by many to be the absolute ultimate in RTS gaming in terms of it just refined the formula and gave it this mass appeal.
Heroes of Might and Magic 3 as well.
Jack, what's the first RTS game you can remember playing?
I think the first real-time strategy game I would remember playing would probably be Stronghold 2.
That's funny because I think Stronghold 1 is the better game of the two.
Never played.
Really? Oh no, Stronghold 1 was really good. And I guess for me, Stronghold 2 is already like not part of like the golden age anymore, even though it's 2005, and I think Supreme Commander might still be part of golden age, and that's 2007. But Stronghold 2 is like the transitioning from 2D to 3D, right? Like Stronghold 2 is like fully three-dimensional, and a lot of games did that around that time, and I spoke out against it previously, but I think it makes the game look much worse, especially at the time. Computers couldn't really handle good three-dimensional graphics just quite yet. I think a good question to ask now is like, would you recommend that game today to a new gamer? Would you tell them go play that game? And with Stronghold 2, I would say no, but with Stronghold 1, I would say yes.
I think there was a lot of innovations, and not all of them hit well, did they? So you're right. We've mentioned this move to 3D or to isometric view in the past. There seem to be a lot of moves in this golden age of technological advancements, but not all of them hit. Some of them are overshadowed. I mean, when I think of one of the games which really stood out for me from 1997 is Dark Reign, The Future of War. Did you ever play it?
I really did not. And that's one game that like never hit my radar ever.
And there's a reason why it never hit your radar, and that's because it came out in the same year, and I think it was weeks apart, as Total Annihilation, which just blew everybody away.
Yeah, I played loads of Total Annihilation when it came out.
Well, you still are.
And yeah. And I was 7 at the time, so I didn't understand the game very well. I was like mostly like watching my big brother play the game. But no, it was an amazing game, and when I look at that Dark Terror, whichever game, see, I don't even remember
Dark Reign.
Can't remember the name in that one. It just doesn't seem to like hit the spot at all, and I would never recommend someone to play that game. Just looking at it now,
which is a shame, because at the time it was one of the most technically advanced RTS games ever made. It was probably, in terms of its mechanics, more technically advanced than Total Annihilation. You had line-of-sight mechanics which were affected by elevation. They were affected by, as in the fog of war was affected by, if you went and stood on a hill, you could see more. It was blocked by hills. It was one of those things which you didn't see in other games around those times. And the AI scripting, the way you could use your units was just, you could set them patrol paths and levels of aggression, and it was just so advanced. And if it hadn't have been for Total Annihilation coming out a couple of weeks later, it would have been the game that people talked about now rather than Total Annihilation.
But would you recommend someone to play that today? Like, so someone is like, I've never played RTS games, I would like to look into it. What games would you recommend me to play? Would you ever tell them play Dark Reign?
No.
Yeah, I would tell them to play Age of Empires 2, for example. Age of Empires 2 is a great game still today. Go and play it.
But I think a lot of it is just in terms of, we've talked about nostalgia in the past, and we have fond memories of these games. And then when you go back and play them again, it's like, well, that was a little bit shit. It doesn't hit the same as what it did back then because we've been spoilt by HD, by hyperrealism. It doesn't have the same impact that it had back then. That's just the way that things are. I mean, we're talking about a game which is almost, 30 years old? Coming up 30 years old?
Yeah. I think there's a couple games that I would still recommend people play today. Like Jack, for example, if you're looking to play some old school RTS games. Something like Cossacks, European Wars. Have you played that, Al?
No, I haven't.
Very cool RTS game, and also flew off a lot of people's radar. I'm not sure why it wasn't that huge of a hit. Maybe because it was a Ukrainian game, but it had like thousands and thousands of units capacity, which not only was it a big thing at the time that you could have like these many thousands of units on the map at the same time, but it still is an odd one out today. New RTS coming out today still have these like really low unit caps.
They do.
Yeah. So if scale is something of interest, like Cossacks, European Wars is still a great game to play today, and that came out like years ago as well.
2001, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And it's quite interesting because when I was preparing for this episode, I was looking at all the games that had been released between 95 and 2007. And Cossacks came out at the same year as Europa Universalis 2. So was it overshadowed by that? And there's all these games, Star Trek Armada, Star Wars Galactic Battlegrounds, these are all from 2001. These are all the same year as Cossacks. Yeah. Dark Reign 2 came out at the same time as Red Alert 2. So you've got the potential for these titles to be significant, but they're overshadowed by not necessarily better games, but by games which utilised better marketing. And is it the case of we've skipped over certain exceptional titles just because something shinier appeared as well?
Yeah, I'm not sure about the Europa Universalis 2, because I don't think it was that big of a game at that time as it is today. And also, like, if Jack would be looking to play one of those games, I would not tell him to play Europa Universalis 2, but I would tell him to play Cossacks. Like, Cossacks is a really fun game still today.
Maybe I'll try it, because I say I've never played it, and I think this is perhaps the thing, the defining thing about this period is that there was just so many games it was impossible to play them all.
Yeah, another RTS in 2001, Empire Earth. Maybe that's the game that overshadowed Cossacks a bit, because Empire Earth was more successful, if I'm not mistaken. And a really cool novel mechanic as well. Still something you don't see about is a progression from the Stone Age to the future and through like 12 ages or something like that. Mm-hmm. Which gives like a real sense of advancement, like progress, I guess, throughout your match. And that's a lot of fun. And you don't see something like that nowadays.
Are they remaking that as well? Is there not like a remake that's in the works for Empire Earth?
Well, they tried with Empire Earth 2 and 3, but those didn't work very well.
Why do you think that RTS games were so popular back then? Because they're not popular now. And we discussed this when we did one of the very first episodes we did of this podcast was the RTS Renaissance, where we talked about how are these games coming back. And it was quite interesting when we interviewed Brandon Castile when we talked about Tempest Rising, and the first question we asked him was, are RTS games coming back? And he said no. And I thought that was quite interesting and very honest of somebody who's making an RTS game in 2025 for him to say, actually, no, they're not. Why do you think they were so popular back then?
I guess more advanced mechanics and grander strategy was quite difficult to do technical wise, and so I mean RTS is very much an abstraction. If you think about Age of Empires, you're training units, like you have like this empty field, and then this villager slams a hammer on the ground, and then a building pops up there, and then out of that building comes out military men out of nowhere because you've collected food on the other side of the map. Like that's like very, very abstract. And nowadays I think we can do a lot better, and people enjoy the more detailed versions of strategy games, like the Paradox Interactive games and so on. And then it's hard to go back to that. Those that were looking for more action, because RTS is very action oriented, got that with single unit games like League of Legends and Dota.
Yeah, so I think that MOBAs, which is what they are, they're really what killed the traditional RTS.
MOBAs and grand strategy games.
Jack, why do you play RTS games? It's a very generic, broad question for you.
Sure. Yeah. I play RTS games because they scratch a particular itch for me that other video games can't. If I'm playing a first-person shooter narrative game, which is very linear in concept, there's an aspect to the warfare that's like realized in the game that's amazing. But there's also an aspect that's missing of being able to command the battle or kind of get in depth on certain aspects of the scenario. It's the same thing. I mean, we talk about it every episode, but Stellaris exists for me importantly because you can play science fiction games, which I would actually argue there aren't very many of, that try to even scratch that itch in a role-playing or even like a world-building scenario. And Stellaris scratches a particular itch where you get to explore that galaxy and interact with all of those various empires and watch that narrative play out of your own devices. It's the same thing with Age of Empires. I just think it wouldn't be as interesting progressing from the Stone Age to the future if you didn't have those other empires to play with. And also, I'm just a fan of sandbox games, and I think that real-time strategy especially kind of plays around in that sandbox.
So is it about control then? Because I guess if you're playing a narrative FPS, they're often on tracks, aren't they? That you go through one level, then the next, and the next. Whereas with an RTS game, you can decide how you're going to tackle a particular mission. You can develop strategies beyond what the developers perhaps put in place, which they have done for an FPS.
But beyond what's reasonable.
Beyond or reasonable, did you say? You just can't help yourself, can you? You just can't help but slip it in.
Look, it's not a Critical Moves episode unless we bring up these two games.
Yeah. I mean, RTS is a lot about, like, it is control, right? The whole aspect of what you're doing is controlling units, and that's the gameplay control.
I think that's a big part of it for multiple people. I would say a bigger aspect of it, though, is what I was saying about realization. It's like playing a game where you encounter one battle versus several. It's a game where the mission in particular might be securing resources, but the entire game for a real-time strategy game is securing multiple resources, keeping track of their locations, checking on your enemies and allies. I think it's about the difference between being that singular soldier or not having control, but also being able to realize the actual scale of the battles, the different variables that are at play. And I mean, a big part of that is controlling those different variables and resources, like your economy in certain games. I just think there are times where you're going to want a different experience, and then there are a lot of people who want to see those sandbox elements interplay.
You bring up a very important word there in scale. Bring this back to these games which kickstarted RTS. Did they have the scale that RTS games have now?
So, what games are you thinking of when you're saying now? Because I would say I see a lot of games still coming out today with very much similar mechanics and scale as most games did back then. Like, I feel like there is like a limited variation of these RTS games. Like, if you think of StarCraft 1 and StarCraft 2, it's basically the same game with added mechanics, and still games coming out. Like we covered Tempest Rising, difference between Tempest Rising and the older games when it comes to scale, when it comes to this similar type of control. It's quite similar. And only games that really start to differ a lot, like simulation-oriented games like Frostpunk or something, start to have like a very different aspect to it.
I mean, Brandon was very clear when he talked about Tempest Rising, and I think it was part of the conversation between you and him where he said, we're not trying to attract a new audience here. We're trying to give people who enjoyed the original games a chance to replay them. I mean, I'm paraphrasing. I'm sure I didn't say those exact words, but there was nothing about Tempest Rising which was intended to be a huge increase or a giant leap forward for RTS games at all, really. And is that the thing? The scale has remained the same. Jack mentions Stellaris. It's an RTS game. It's played in real time, but it's 4X as well. You have Grand Strategy RTS games. You have 4X RTS games.
Yeah, and then when you look at something like Anno 1602, which is one of those like really old RTS games that was very different from the regular formula, and then you have Anno 1800s, like this, that changed a lot. Like the scale of it changed, the complexity of it changed, and how you play the game changed dramatically, I would say.
And are they still RTS games?
Yeah, I mean, they go very heavy towards simulation and like city building, and like people play it for very different reasons. Like you can play Anno 1800 as like a competitive one-on-one multiplayer game, but that's not what most people play it for. And even when I think of the old classics, StarCraft, Warcraft, Age of Empires, people would play these games most people that I met and talk to, they play those games where they build their city, they build their little empire, their town, and their army. They build up this huge army until they have a big enough force, and then they right click to the other side of the map, crush the enemy, and that was their game.
Is there anything wrong with that?
No, but you can only have so many iterations of doing that. At some point you're like, okay, I've played this game, I've done this, I don't need another similar game that does that. Okay, we're doing this again, but the units look a little bit different, or what they shoot looks a bit different, or something like that.
So perhaps when we say, I know we've gone on a bit of a tangent from talking about those original games. Perhaps when we say that RTS is dead, or it's fading away, perhaps we've got it wrong, and perhaps it's just evolved. Because the likes of Stellaris is an RTS game. It's played in real time. Anno, played in real time. So maybe these games aren't dead. Maybe we're just looking at it wrong. And maybe it's, these games like Warcraft 2, like Command & Conquer, like Dark Reign, like Total Annihilation, StarCraft, all of these games which were released 95 to 98 at the very, very early start of strategy gaming. Maybe they're a particular subsector or subgenre of RTS games. Real-time tactics, perhaps. Some people might call them that. I know you've mentioned this before, Tim, that games like that, they're not strategy games. If you're just collecting one resource and then building up troops, is it really strategy, or is it actually tactics with a bit of economy management tacked onto it?
Yeah, I would say something like StarCraft is the economy management is extremely simplified, right? It is very limited in terms of the strategy aspect of it, and so if you compare Stellaris and StarCraft, it would be a bit odd to put them in the same category.
Whereas the chief mechanic of being able to play the game in real time is a feature of both of them.
It is, and I guess something you focus on when you play Stellaris, you focus on very much the like very long-term strategy aspect of making decisions that will impact the future in a very strategic sense. Whereas StarCraft, a lot of what you're doing is you're micromanaging individual units to make sure that they like shoot optimally and avoid enemy fire and things like that. You have like strategy aspect to it, but it's centered around a very rock paper scissors aspect of the interaction of the units with like. So yeah, I would say StarCraft is almost it. At the time, it maybe wasn't, but now with the broader view of it, it's almost closer to a tactics game than a strategy game compared to a lot of the games coming out today.
And I think when StarCraft for me was one of the first games where they introduced this concept of APM, and there's a particular meta, a particular way that you must play in this particular set of clicks and set of build orders in order to be successful if you are to be competitive. And I guess you compare that to Stellaris, where, as you say, it's long-term planning for your empire. It's an entirely different game, yet they're both at their heart RTS games. It's interesting.
What games would you recommend, Jack, to play from back then?
Sure, I've said it before. Age of Empires 2, which Tim brought up as being in the golden age, so I'll throw it in there. Very good game, hugely influential to the industry. Same thing I would probably say with Age of Mythology. I think is a good switch up on the mechanics there.
Yeah.
I did want to quickly say I did prepare for this episode, and I wanted to surprise both of you by having played fully through Total Annihilation. I bought the game, took my time to research it, was going to boot it up on a Mac, and I could not get it to launch, so here we are.
It wouldn't work?
No, it wouldn't work on my end.
It's such a shame because
playing
it's excellent. It really is. Going back to what Tim said before, I have such fond memories of playing Total Annihilation. I was 20 when it came out, and I absolutely loved it. And it really influenced the games that I played from then on. From 1997 Total Annihilation all the way to 2007 Supreme Commander. Those 10 years for me was RTS games, and it always came back to TA. Tim with his beloved Beyond All Reason, which is essentially Total Annihilation remastered. I'm sure he'll correct me if I'm wrong there, but it's based upon the TA system. The TA it's like a rebuilt engine. Is that correct?
Yep.
Yeah. I went back to try and play it, and it just didn't feel like it did the first time.
No.
It just didn't hit the same way, and I think it's because my 14-inch black and white. It was colour, really, Jack. But my 14-inch monitor has been replaced by a 32-inch monitor, and of course you lose that fidelity when you bring something which wasn't built to run in native HD. You put it on an HD screen, and it just looks like lots of pixels. You lose a lot. It's almost as if technology moving on has killed the ability to enjoy these old games. But we can't take away their influence. The start of RTS games was Warcraft 2, Command & Conquer, Dark Reign, Total Annihilation. This is where it all started from. You can't ever take away the influence of these games.
I actually played Red Alert today, Red Alert 1.
Did you play the original or did you play the remastered collection?
So I played the original back in the day. I still remember going through the campaign and like finding the missions really difficult and so on as a kid because I was a child then. But now I played Open Red Alert. Which is like the crowdsourced version, or what would you call it? It's very simple, these games, And when I watch new releases for strategy games, I'm a bit afraid that they would still feel as simple as those games then.
What, new games? Or do you mean like new RTS games?
New RTS games, like I always fear them to be the same formula as Dune 2,
Well, yeah. I mean, other than our mentions of Stellaris and games of that ilk, your core RTS formula hasn't changed.
And that's maybe why I don't play them.
But you do. You play Beyond All Reason pretty much every day.
Beyond All Reason is so... It's so advanced when it comes to the mechanics. It's really a different story to me. And if you play this competitive multiplayer version of it, it pushes everything to the limit so much that there's a huge amount of depth in the strategy used. With Total Annihilation, you had a multiplayer scene as well, and it went into that direction as well. But like in Red Alert, I played it today. Red Alert, the strategy aspect to it is extremely limited. You have infantry and you have vehicles. And the infantry, you have infantry that's good against infantry, or infantry that's good against vehicles. And vehicles, you have vehicles that's good against infantry, or vehicles that's good against vehicles. Mm-hmm. And like you have your refinery that goes and gets money for you, and you use that to build units. And that's like 90% of the game that you have right there.
It's probably closer to 100% of the game.
So okay, you start up a match. I'm starting a match. I'm playing against someone else. I already know what I'm gonna do. I don't have a huge amount of adaptation to what the enemy's doing. And so if I'm playing one match or the next, there's not that much going on. With StarCraft, it gets more complicated, and you have a few more options. You have a few more considerations, but again, it's quite limited. Whereas with Beyond All Reason, I guess it helped that I played it at the top level, whereas I didn't play Red Alert or StarCraft at that high of a level competitively. But there's just so much to consider, and so much adaptation and personalization in your strategy, I think. And that's something that Stellaris does fantastically, is you can personalize. You can find your personality and character in your gameplay.
So I want to ask you a question here then. When you break it down to the core elements, how much difference is there between Total Annihilation and Beyond All Reason? And I don't just mean there's more units or there's different units introduced.
Well, actually, a big thing that we're trying to do with Beyond All Reason is make sure there's not too many units, not to overwhelm, and not to create like this creeping up of more and more units.
Don't add them for the sake of it.
Yeah, exactly. So at the core of it, it's very similar. It's just that I think a huge difference is the controls used.
Right. Okay. So I guess what I'm getting at is this: is that we're saying that these games back then were very simple, but it's very similar to a game that you play more than any other. Beyond All Reason is very, very similar to a game that was released in 1997, and it holds your attention now, just because of the controls, because it looks better, because it's native HD, so everything works the way it should. But is it much different from what it would have been to play Total Annihilation in 1997?
It matters a lot, these controls, and
of course it does.
We do see a sizable amount of people who are still playing Supreme Commander today. Mm-hmm. That which is a great game as well, but nowadays it aged a lot in terms of stability, in terms of lag, using lots of units on the map and these big multiplayer matches, and then the game doesn't work very well anymore. It starts crashing, it starts lagging out, and so there's a sizable amount of people who play Supreme Commander who are like, hold on, there's this Beyond All Reason, and that actually runs really well and is relatively bug free. Mm-hmm. And they make the switch and they move over. Even though they really like Supreme Commander a lot, it just doesn't hold up so much. So yeah, no, there is something to it, that it's the same game but just done better and better polished and more modern. You're right.
We've talked about this before about the Renaissance, and I don't want to go back to that. But is there still, if you look at the success of Beyond Our Reason, if you look at the fact that, Sanctuary Shattered Sun is going to be, it's the spiritual successor to Supreme Commander. These games, and there's very, very little difference between them in terms of their core mechanics, between the originals made in the 90s or in the 2000s and these new games. So the market is still there, is it?
It's hard to tell, really, because I don't have the numbers of profitability and so on of these gaming studios, right? But I see way more 4X games coming out than your traditional Dune 2 version game, and I see them being more successful and being done by bigger studios.
So, okay, let's wrap up. If you could pick three games from between 1995 and 2007. And you can't use Total Annihilation because that's beyond our reason. If you could pick 3 games there to give the remastered treatment to, or to see a sequel made, what would they be?
That's a really good question. But yeah, it's a really good question. I would want to see them being made to my liking, because some of them they already tried, like Jack mentioned Stronghold earlier. Like there was Stronghold 1, there was Stronghold 2, and I think there's even more of them, but they were not remade very well. So if we assume they're being remade well, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, same thing with Age of Empires. There was Age of Empires 4, and that was like, oh yeah, we're gonna remake this game into something new with modern stuff, and then it was, in my opinion, it was really not good, because it was the same but not the same, and I think people still today prefer Age of Empires 2 over Age of Empires 4, which is crazy to think about, if you ask me.
Well, Nuno would say that Age of Empires 2 is the best game ever made, wouldn't he?
It's certainly a really, really good game, and it's sad to see that the people who own the IP don't understand the success of their own game. Oh, okay, I can give you a really good one. Populous, the beginning.
Uh-huh.
I would love to see a really well-made remake of that. Not the same game, but nice graphics or something like that. But I think that's, I mean, first of all, a RTS game entirely in the Stone Age, that's not something you see a lot about, Usually if the Stone Age is involved, it's like the First Age or something, and it's like really rudimentary, and it's a thing that you move out as fast as possible. But their Populous is a game entirely in the Stone Age and centered around like shamans and magic and stuff, and that was really, really cool. And I think it's a game you can still play today and have a lot of fun with it, which is fantastic for a game released at that time. It could use a remake very, very well.
I remember playing Populous on floppy disk.
Yeah, that's how old this game was, yeah.
Ancient game.
And the magic system was so cool. That there's still anything like it today in any game.
So Populous the beginning was more RTS, because the original Populous was a god game, essentially, wasn't it? So
No.
Yeah.
Populous, the beginning is like a proper RTS, like very classical RTS. And then something else maybe surprising, but simply because I would like to explore that a little bit more, but Sacrifice.
I don't think I played that one.
It was a very special game. Basically, imagine it's an RTS game, but you play it from like almost first person view.
Is it chess-like in the way that it plays?
Not really, no.
No? What am I... There's a game I'm thinking of. I can't remember what it was called. But the whole sacrifice, like sacrificing your pawns. I'm sure there was a game.
Oh, yeah. Oh, so no, but like you can... Basically, you can steal the souls of the enemy combatants and sacrifice them at your altar. And
right.
That's a way to get more souls. It had huge flaws, Sacrifice, but there was some good stuff in there, and I think it's something that could use a sequel where it's a little bit better fleshed out. And then, I'm going to give you another spicy one. Yeah, this is something that hasn't been mentioned yet. I believe the game was Gangsters 2? Yeah, Gangsters 2, Vendetta, was a mafia-centered RTS game.
Yeah.
And it was really, really fun. You played the role as a mafia boss that could hire thugs and give them weapons, and they could move around on a city map and basically take over money laundering businesses. And they had to try to snipe the enemy gangster and the enemy mafia boss and so on. And I remember playing it multiplayer. Like, there's a single player campaign which was really rich in story, and it was actually really well done with really nice cinematics and so on. But the multiplayer variant of it was quite simplified. There wasn't that much strategy involved, and it could use some extra stuff there to make that part really interesting. But that's definitely a game that's I never hear mentioned, but it was tons and tons of fun.
And I think that's a particular type of game which isn't done very often, but if it was done really well, the whole gangster mafia type of thing. I know there's the mafia games, but I think as like a strategy style game, it's not done very often, is it?
It's not, and it has so much potential to it, and I'd love to see more of that.
Jack, what about you? Have you? I appreciate you weren't around for the majority of this period of time, but you've played some of them, you've seen some of them. What really jumps out as something you'd love to see remade or sequelized?
Well, I'm going to say this from a really uneducated point of view, but having done just very preliminary research on Command & Conquer, I'd love to see, especially if there's really that golden of a narrative there that people appreciated so much, them bring up to standard the original games and then kind of help reshape that narrative back into what the possibly the most recent entries were. So that way more people could experience that story. And I also just think that there are it's kind of hard to say for strategy games what deserves a remake or to bring up to par. But it would probably be Command & Conquer, and obviously I'm going to throw in Total Annihilation since I didn't get to play it.
Well, you could say a
Behave
remake
yourself.
of it.
Behave yourself, honestly. Beyond all reason. Oh, shut up. If you want to play Total Annihilation, play Beyond All Reason, because it's the same game. We've just covered this. There's no difference. It just looks prettier.
Someone even made like a little widget that plays the original Total Annihilation soundtrack while you're playing Beyond All Reason.
Oh, perfect. Because the music, and I think that's something which we maybe haven't mentioned, but some of the music from these games was just epic, absolutely epic.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Command & Conquer, Jack. Yeah. Anything else?
Stronghold 2. You can skip the first one since that was Tim's favorite.
And you played Age of Empires. Have you played the later games?
I've played Age of Empires 2. I've put quite a bit of time into that, and I've played a little bit of Age of Empires 4.
Better? Worse? Missing something?
Yeah, the charm. I don't know. I would just say Age of Empires 2 is such a straightforward game to play. The map is so readable. It's just all of the same qualities that would have made that game successful back then exist now. Age of Empires 4 was a little bit more... I think it had even more of a fog of war gameplay loop, if I remember correctly. And that was something that didn't necessarily turn me off, but it was a different pace to me.
All right. Well, I'll tell you mine, and then we'll close out. Okay. And they're so obvious. Yeah, they're so obvious. From 2004, The Lord of the Rings: The Battle for Middle-earth.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I think that if we could skip unit limits and you could have your epic scale battles like you saw in the movies, that would just be an excellent title to see made now.
Can you imagine if there was like Battle for Helm's Deep and like you get to control that? That would be epic, right?
That's what I mean, and not just a tiny section.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it was Joe who was talking about it, and he said, it's supposed to be the battle for Middle Earth, and it just felt like it's not. It's a battle for this tiny part of the world, and it loses its scale through limiting it in that way, which was a consequence of limitations of technology in 2004. So, Lord of the Rings: Battle for Middle Earth, also from 2004. Please, please, please let me have Dawn of War. Warhammer 40k, Dawn of War. Have you played that one, Jack?
No, I have not.
Oh, please play it, because it's just incredible. They can either do a sequel or they can do a remaster. I don't mind. And on that point of a Dawn of War remaster, there was some news recently. Did you know that Relic Entertainment, that made Dawn of War, has managed to escape from Sega? They've gone independent again. Were you aware of that?
I was not.
So Relic are huge. They made Company of Heroes. They made the Dawn of War series. They've split from Sega, and the guy who is a managing partner for Imona, which is a company which is now bankrolling Relic Entertainment, visited Warhammer World recently, and he posted a photo on his LinkedIn of him at Warhammer World. Now, he's not there as a tourist. He's there because there's something going on. Now, is that a remaster? Is it just a resurrection of the series? There's something going on, and that's something that needs to be watched very, very carefully, because I think that we could see something from Relic in the Warhammer 40k universe coming up. So that's number 2, and there's certainly potential for that happening. And finally, 2006's Star Wars Empire at War.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm on board with that.
It deserves to be remade or give us a sequel. When Zero Company was released, many of the comments were, can we just have Empire at War 2 instead, please?
But it was Mickey Mouse that said no.
Mickey Mouse says no to everything, doesn't he? Well, that's it then. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for chatting to me. It's appreciated. Not sure what we'll do next week, because let's just fly by the seat of our pants. If the listeners want to come and tell us which games they remember the best from the Golden Age, or by all means tell us that we're wrong and it's not the Golden Age and it's a different time period, head over to criticalmovespodcast.com, which is our main website and has all of our links for our Discord, our social media, all the ways you can get involved. Come along, say hi, tell us how wrong we are. It's all good. It's all good. Guys, thanks very much for joining me. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Have a good one.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks very much for joining us. Take it easy. Goodbye.